candid conversations with wedding professionals as they share their stories, insights, and tips from inside the wedding industry. We'll chat about how to be authentic and that it's okay not to be perfect or run your business like someone else's Instagram. Let's dive into the privilege it is to serve our clients and discover the talented creatives that make up our community. When we share what we know and who we are, we better serve our couples as a wedding day team, as well as each other. Simply put, Be Fabbo. Now here's your host, Bobbi Brinkman.
Hey friends and listeners, today's episode is all about photography gear, and that's what topic you guys asked me to bring you somebody that could share some insights, some tips, and get a little bit geeky. So I'm thrilled that we have Bud Johnson on the other side of the screen joining me today, and aside from his passion and love for Diet Mountain Dew, he also shares my love and passion for teaching, educating, and above all, telling people stories through his lens. So as I said, Bud Johnson is an accomplished, amazing photographer and wedding educator. All about gear. He does a lot of technical education, so you definitely want to follow him. He's originally from Richmond, Virginia, and is now currently based here in Savannah, Georgia, but travels all over. Bud has been privileged to photograph weddings in Europe, Iceland, and now he's covering the Low Country. But trust me, people hire him and his talent to go anywhere their love story is being told. He is married to the love of his life, the hardest working, intelligent, kind, and always beautiful Sarah. And I must add that during COVID, she is doing amazing YouTube specials on teaching what it's like to homeschool, tips for those people and those moms and those dads that never thought they entered a classroom to teach, barely wanted to be in there when they're learning, right? So she's doing amazing things, helping that and filling a need and being of service to all those parents that are at home. So she has a YouTube all about that. You can get more of that when you reach out to Bud. But, he has 4 amazing children, and his wedding photography is born out of his love for marriage. He's a passionate proponent of marriage and the joy of photography, so he married those two together. He has the pleasure of not only photographing weddings, but as an evangelist, he has also had the honor of marrying couples. So as I said, he is a very well-known, very talented. He's the go-to guy here for technical camera gear. He's going to tell you why it's okay to have a love affair with your camera gear. And as I mentioned, he's also an amazing educator. Him and Wendy Norman from Apartment B, a previous podcast episode, teach Instagram and workshops, and Bud also does workshops throughout Savannah. So all this information will be in the show notes. So everybody sit back. I'm thrilled and honored to introduce you to the Diet Drinking Mountain Dew cohort here in Savannah with me, the amazing, talented, all-around good guy, Bud Johnson.
All right, listeners, thanks for joining us. And as always, thanks for hitting that listen button when you get ready to join us. But today we're going to bring you all about equipment. We're going to talk about gear. We're going to tell you why it's okay to have a love affair with your gear. And the very talented Bud Johnson is joining me for this conversation. And guys, we're going to have, like always, a candid conversation. We've got about 21 of your questions. We will get to some of them, not all of them. But you're in for a treat with Mr. Johnson on the other side of the screen here, on the other side of the microphone. He is very influential in the city of Savannah. He's also very influential in the wedding industry itself. He's also an educator, very talented, but he's a good all-around human being. So thanks, Bud, for sharing your time with our listeners. And go ahead and tell them a little bit more about who is Bud Johnson and what makes up Bud Johnson and how did Bud Johnson get here?
That's a really good question. First off, I got to say, this is sunburn, and I'm also blushing from that introduction. Goodness gracious. You really set the standard pretty high here. I hope I don't let anybody down.
Exactly.
The first question you asked is kind of like, why my love for photography? And I think that kind of answers, in summary, about everything you just kind of asked there.
Right.
And why it's okay to like love our gear and love the things that we do. And for me, it started at a really early age. I just kind of found a camera. It turns out every time I took a photo and looked at the subsequent print, I could remember so much more of the day. I'm sure people can relate. You see a photo and all of a sudden a concert comes washing back or some friends come washing back, and it just meant so much more to me. And I appreciated how that memory was kind of captured. I was like, you know what, I think I want to make this like a daily thing. So for me, I started like daily photo projects. I just kept taking more and more pictures and kind of developed an eye to make things more attractive, or maybe that's not the right word, but more interesting to me. And just kind of spread from there. And then I kept asking myself, well, what new gear could I get? What new thing could I get to make it better? Assuming that I had met my my maximum, and surely it's the gear that's going to unlock all these magical abilities, which isn't quite the case. But that's kind of where it started. I just kind of jumped in. And all of the technical stuff and just shooting turned into, well, as I grew as a person too, I just loved people more. And it made sense to help other people capture the memories that I was also fond of and proud of. And it just kind of turned into this hobby that eventually turned into this career for me to be able to share what I do and capture these memories for so many people around the world. And I tell people all the time, I'm spoiled rotten. It really is a lot of fun what I do.
Privileged. We're just so privileged to have the witness, to think that we basically do have that opportunity for what is normally the happiest day. I never say it's the best day, because I think waking up the next day is pretty damn good. Finally married and all the crap behind it.
It's a good way to put it.
So I think that we get the opportunity to, through a little box, to just be a witness to this and know that we're the historians. Like, we're preserving where it's at, what's going on. And especially now during COVID, we're going to be the ones that get to capture the mask. We're going to be the ones that go down in history. Like, where was that? Mom and Dad, what was that all about? So we're part of history and we get to contribute to that. So I think as we grow in our careers, our gear does as well. And let's face it, when I first started, it has changed drastically.
Quite a bit.
Shooting professionally, bud.
So actually, I shot my first wedding when I was still in high school.
Yep.
That was 2004. So yeah, about 16 years I've been shooting. Now that was, one wedding that year, and then maybe one or two the next, and just kind of slowly built up from there. And I was that Craigslist special guy. So, $500, I'll do whatever you want. I'll bring everything I own and we'll take as many pictures as possible. And from there, it kind of started. I was shooting male modeling photos. I was working for a gym, and it seemed like all of the girls that were working out and working on their body could get photos whenever they wanted. And all these poor guys were working super hard and they couldn't get any love. So I said, hey, pal, I'll shoot your photos for this much money. And that kind of took off. So it's the love for gear definitely kind of lives throughout that entire experience. For sure.
And at what point did you decide that, when you first started, I'm like you, I started in high school, but way back in the 80s, way that whole other decade prior to all the other stuff where you actually had to put film in the back of the camera and lug it on your shoulder. Those days. So, at what point when you knew you were going to start collecting and making a living, was it at that point that you knew you needed to invest before we get too far down the gear line? But is that the spot in your brain that said, hey, I'm collecting money, I'm challenged with a great responsibility, I need to start investing in legitimate gear?
Yeah, I think my growth as a business and my growth as a photographer also was along the lines of my growth as a man, as a husband, as a friend. So I think as I grew in my marriage too, like there were a lot of times when I was young and happily married, we both would have our jobs and we'd kind of squirrel away cash, and we had our hobbies. And that's kind of what I was doing, was just kind of taking some of my own money, buying gear here and there, and then kind of like, hey, Sarah, I got this new rig that can do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And so it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I've got a job and I got to get the right gear. It was just, hey, there's gear out there. Let me start doing this. And as it got more expensive, of course, I didn't want to be that guy that's like buying stuff and not talking about things. So Sarah got involved. We decided to make this a legitimate business, and then it just kind of took off from there. So I wouldn't say that the business necessarily inspired the purchases. Almost it was the other way around. As I was purchasing and my love for it increased, and just the junk that I started to acquire, I started to realize what was good and what was bad, what was worthwhile, what wasn't. And because of that, it almost inspired the business. Maybe I had to justify some of the purchases a little bit. Like, if you buy a $2,000 camera, can I then book a $2,000 gig? And so once those things were feasible, it just kind of took off from there.
And that was one of my questions. One of my questions was, are you one of the gentlemen and talented artists that fall with you can have anything in your hand to create a photograph, or better equipment, better photograph?
Yeah. See, I don't even like the word better, because they're just different. Like you could have, I've got behind me a Leica camera, that thing brand new was an exorbitant amount of money. You could have most expensive equipment and the highest quality caliber brand and still do nothing with it, be kind of a dud photographer. So it's just not necessarily even better. It's just different, and kind of, I like to explore different types of gear. I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly. So yeah, no, I think where if you've got yourself a decent-ish camera, you can do anything with it. Yeah, of course there are some limitations. Off-camera flash brings up a whole new thing, and then of course focal length if you're shooting really wide or really zoomed in. So there's a lot of different options, but yeah.
Well, and I think we're now at 2020, especially the prosumer camera gear has all become very manageable and obtainable. And so, back in the days, I remember somebody be like, oh, $29.95 for that camera. Then I got to put the film cost in there. To the very first digital cameras that came out, that were $20,000. And you're like, oh my God, And so now we're way down there for consumers to buy a pro level camera to get the results. And let's face it, we have iPhones now. So I think that's a really good thing for our listeners to understand that, we're both been in the industry for a long time, and we both are from you have to have the heart and passion to do this. The tools matter, but they're not what's going to get you their longevity. They're not what's going to build your career. The other myth is guys always have to have the latest and the greatest. The guys always have to have that. So I'm glad Sarah was like, no, let's make a business out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't so much like, let me get the latest and greatest. In fact, what I would buy was used, because I am such like a penny pincher. I have no problem spending money. I just want to be very intelligent with it. So I used to buy a lot of things used, and I'd try things knowing that I would flip them or sell them, or maybe even sell them for more if I could get them kind of in a busted shape, but repair them in some sense. Right. Which, repairing camera gear sounds like you're doing open heart surgery sometimes, but really it can kind of be easy. So I'd buy old lenses and try them out, and pass them around, let friends borrow them, use them, buy them. So yeah, I was trying to be intelligent rather than, let me just buy the newest thing that B&H email me to buy. Right.
Well, there's an old saying, I'll date myself, but back in my day, we always said that you marry the lens and date the body, because your lenses, your glass will last forever. So,
I still subscribe to that.
I think that's a great way to talk about that. So let's segue in a little bit to, for listeners that are listening in, I'm going to do the horrible word of assumption, and we're going to assume that you are in the wedding industry. If you're a newbie coming in, welcome. But we're gonna jump a lot of the beginning part of it, and we're gonna talk about what a wedding photographer needs to have in order to shoot a wedding. So give us a general idea. The number one question we always get asked is, "Hey, bud, what's in your gear bag?"
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Yep.
So where do you want to say, like, what's in the gear bag in entirety, or do you want to start from the beginning, what you need?
Yeah, no, I think where do you think somebody needs to start? Let's just assume that everybody has a couple lenses and body. We can talk about format, we can talk about film, but you really are one of the go-to gear guys, and everybody out, Tina will link back in the show notes. He has a great YouTube, and he's, like I told you, aside from all the Mountain Dew that he drinks along with me, he does invest back in his business. He invests back in his business, and he does it the right way. And he's a teacher at heart, so he wants everybody to succeed. So we'll link back to his YouTube, but you got to follow him on Instagram for his IG. So, wherever you would like to start. I mean, you're the pro here. I lead you. That's why I wanted you on the show. Okay. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So for me, it comes a little bit, we're taking a few things for granted in terms of like style and ease and budget and some of those things. I'll kind of tell you where I've landed now and kind of why I have done what I've done. That's not to say if you are getting there, maybe your budget doesn't allow you quite the range of lenses or flashes that I use, or maybe all that stuff would be pointless for you to own anyways, because you don't know how to use it all yet. Maybe you're still learning some of the basics, which is perfectly adequate as well. But personally, for me on a wedding day, I have at least 2 camera bodies, and that's for a couple reasons. One is an instant backup. If something dreadfully were to happen, if it freezes. I was shooting a wedding recently, about a year, maybe less than a year, torrential downpour, and I made some rookie mistake of changing my memory card while it was raining. I was just like, oh, well, that's a dead camera. It didn't kill it, but it's like, well, I can't trust now. So the camera just had to retire, and my other camera came in. Now, of course, my clients didn't even know. They didn't even bat an eye because I didn't bat an eye, because there was nothing to worry about. So having 2 cameras is one like backup system, but also ordinarily I have like a wider and then a tighter. And what I mean by that is like a focal length of like a 35 millimeter and then maybe a 70-200 or 100 millimeter, something that's going to get me a little closer and a little different look and compression. So having those options on me at all times allows me to see an environment and then try to just squeeze everything out of it. Because I'm sure we can all relate to the 5-minute portrait session in a parking lot of a venue that's like, hey,
Right.
this is the only time you have for couples portraits. Well, it's really hard to do if you've only got, a single focal length. And even that I say with a big asterisk beside it, because sometimes a single focal length pushes you creatively. But having the options is nice. So 2 camera bodies, a couple lenses. I'm a big fan of prime lenses personally. I have some zoom lenses for particular times, like during the ceremony, maybe during cocktail hour when I don't want to intrude, or maybe I haven't broken the ice with all the guests yet, even though by cocktail hour, I'm pretty much best friends with both sides of the wedding party and parents, but maybe I haven't met all the guests yet. So for me to walk in there with a 35 millimeter and shake their hand while they're all just trying to get some reprieve from the Georgia heat, maybe that's not best. So some sort of long lens.
Right.
So a couple lenses, something kind of wider, something kind of longer, have your 2 bodies, and then of course a means to carry them. So I've started using a big cart to carry all my stuff.
Right.
I threw my back out last October. I just had a crazy month of travel, and I was pulling the Pelican case, putting it in the airplanes, and somehow I pulled my back. And so I became the cart guy. Sarah likes to make fun of me now because I look like some older guy, but walk in with my cart and my bags and my lights and everything. So it's really nice. Even if I have an assistant or an associate or a second for the day, it's still nice to be able to carry everything. So even if you have all the gear in the world, if you can't get it to the place securely, you're going to find yourself leaving stuff at home. So this kind of that idea of this propensity to carry. Are you willing to carry the stuff that you own? And then it's worth getting. If you're not even going to carry it, then don't own it. It's just an asset that's losing value over time.
Well, and you touched on that too. It's, no matter what profession you're in, wedding, portrait, whatever, you're going to have a backup. And your backup can always be a backup as you improve and you grow. But I think I love the fact that you explained to everybody, this is why you need to have 2 lenses. But let's face it, there's a lot of people that want to have 85 lenses. There's a lot of people that shoot both cameras both ways. Yeah. So as we're out with our gear and you have them on your bodies, and our bodies do take wear and tear, so does the gear. So as you've kept your gear along the way, what's your take on 2 bodies, a couple lenses? How do we keep adding? How do we know when to add? When we get more work, when we want to be creative? Kind of what's your Bud Johnson's guideline for when to keep your set growing? And do we need to grow it?
Yeah. So truthfully, every year I kind of have my own, breakdown. So I'm able to look at a lot of my favorite catalogs, my favorite weddings. And, in Lightroom, you can say like, show me all the metadata, show me all the pictures I took with this camera, with this lens, and poof, it'll show you. And because I rate all my stuff with my workflow leading up to editing,
right,
I can see real quickly like, oh, wow, I took 85% of the entire wedding at 35 millimeter. Well, for me, that tells me 35 millimeter needs to be front and foremost in my camera bag. It's always going to be on my body. It's just something I don't have to think about anymore because I use it a lot. I did that and I saw I was using my Canon 50 1.2, like 85 to 90% of an entire wedding delivered. And part of me is like, okay, this is kind of nice that I've found my rut. I'm good at this and I can continue to shoot almost blindfolded. But instead I sold the lens. I was like, I don't want this lens anymore because I was in a rut and I felt like my photography was in a rut. So that one I sold in favor of buying some other lenses. So for me, it was a creative decision, not necessarily a business one. And I wanted to get out of what I've made myself do over time and try something else. So for me, it was more of a creative push to try something. When it comes to shooting weddings, goodness, I think you can shoot an entire wedding with either like a 50 millimeter and a 100 millimeter or a 35 millimeter and like a 130. Like you could really do it with just 2 lenses. But because I found myself in this middle zone, my photos just weren't compelling anymore. They were intimate and they were special for the couple, but they weren't compelling to me. So that motivated me to try some other glass. So sometimes it's a business decision. Sometimes it's a creative one. Personally, it's probably more on the creative side. What can I create with some new substance, new equipment?
So we'll interject right here before we go back to the equipment. Listeners, you heard him say that he made a decision based on his rut. So now we live in Instagram world. So everybody falls in love with Bud Johnson on Instagram. And for all this year, we've seen this work. And all of a sudden, the pictures are getting a different vibe. The pictures are getting a different look. Good idea, bad idea. Is it important to change for your couples as well as changing for yourself? Because let's face it, you want to avoid burnout, you better be changing creativity along the way.
Yeah, my couples never said, "Hey, bud, you're shooting a lot with a 50. Can you change it up?" Like no one ever would even think to say that. Maybe if I've got a really dedicated photography couple, which I tend to shoot a lot of other photographers, which is always flattering and extremely a lot of pressure as well.
Right.
But none of my clients said, "Hey, pal, you're really getting in a rut. You should change things up." It was really just for me. I saw some of the photos that inspired me, so I always try to do like this yearly rundown of photos I've taken, and also some of my favorite ones, the ones that I've saved, the ones that I've downloaded, the ones that I've liked. And you can go on Instagram very quickly and say, like, show me all the photos I liked. And I started looking and researching them. Man, these are wider, these are different. There's maybe compression in the photo. Well, how do I get those things? So sometimes it's not just about evaluating yourself, but evaluating other people too, and say, like, if I want my work to change or to morph or evolve, or maybe just include a wider range of abilities, sometimes that does result in buying new gear. It doesn't always have to, but it definitely can.
So we have the basic kit, 2 bodies and some lenses. And I agree 100%. I think you can shoot a wedding with a 35mm 50 because our legs are our tripods. We bend up and down to get the height and the difference. So there's always a way to figure out how to deliver your product. And the second thing I'll agree 100% on is couples absolutely have no idea what we do. They just think we take a better picture with a big black box than we do with our cell phone. And then some of them really piss me off and their picture comes out better when they're standing right next to it, right? So now,
I'll tell you what, the cell phones we have these days, they're 10 times better than the cameras that I use. My first digital cameras were embarrassing compared to this, not compared to my gear. Compared to this, it's embarrassing.
Oh, exactly. And that's why there's iPhone photography classes out there.
Yeah.
So we have our basics. So now let's shift a little bit and talk about format and brand. For most of you listening around, we know that we have a medium format people that might been moved to digital. So do you shoot film sometimes? What format? And then now let's talk about brand. How is important in brand? And for the record, he's going to probably mention some things here that will link back. He may or may not be affiliated. I may not be affiliated. We're not telling you have to go here. This is what Bud Johnson, that's why he's here. This is what he chooses to get his job done. So he is offering his professional opinion. So save sending me the letters of why we talked about one brand versus right? I get those all the time, right?
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about format and then why you're choosing what you're choosing. But don't go into mirrorless yet. Let's hang and talk.
I will tell you one thing about the whole brand, like ecosystems and things. If you do decide to align yourself with a brand, make sure it's one that's willing to also stick its neck out for you.
Yep.
For instance, the lighting company that I am sponsored by, first and foremost, they're always like, look, we don't have to use exclusively our flashes. We know that you need to get a job done. And so having a company that's willing to say, look, you can promote us and share, and please tell people when you do use our stuff, but they're not like, don't ever mention this, don't ever mention a different brand or you're dead to us. So I'm pretty picky when it comes to people I do associate with. And for me, it's going to be someone who's willing to not lock everything down, because my stuff is all over the map. Just within arm's reach, I've got medium format film and Leica SL, really expensive digitals, and lenses that are $50, lenses that are $3,000. So when it comes to brand, just kind of jumping in there, my workhorse, the stuff I use the most more than anything else, just by numbers, not necessarily even by preference, just by numbers, is Canon cameras and Canon lenses. Sigma lenses is next to that, and then Leica lenses is maybe even above the Sigma in terms of quantity, how many photos I take with it, how many I deliver and stuff like that. So for me, there's no like, I'm Canon and Canon only, or Nikon and Nikon only, or Leica and Leica only. So I'm kind of all over the map. When I do occasionally shoot film from time to time, I particularly like Polaroid pull-aparts. So before they were extinct, I bought a boatload of them, and I have a dedicated freezer just for them to keep them as long as possible. So I actually have a medium format camera. Actually, I'll grab it. It's this big honking thing. Bobbi, this might look familiar to you, or you've seen one, but the Mamiya RZ67, and on the back, I just have a Polaroid back for it instead of the 120 on this one. And I can put pack film in there and still shoot that. So I have some like personal projects that I still do from time to time. I took this thing all the way to Iceland one year and did a personal project just on this, which was kind of fun. So film is really cool. This is, of course, is a medium format film for anybody who's listening or doesn't know what it is. So there's, in terms of ecosystems, film, digital, Canon, Sigma. I don't shoot Nikon anymore. When I very first started, I shot Nikon, and I shot Nikon on film, really. So all the FD glass. And then as soon as I went digital, I never touched Nikon again. I just don't like the ergonomics. It doesn't really speak to me much. Their new Z6 is pretty sweet though. But yeah, that's probably the one like blind spot. I just don't touch any Nikon stuff for whatever reason.
Oh, and you touch on that. It's how it felt in your hand. So that brings in the love affair. I mean, you need to have that relationship with this gear. And we joke tongue in cheek about it. It's a love affair, not because we wouldn't invest on the money in, but we need to be able to count on it. I'm sure you hear it all the time. Throughout a wedding day, people say, man, I don't see you look in the back of your camera. I don't see you playing around. You know what? It's an extension of me. I mean, it falls to my side of my body. It's on my wrist. It's just there. I don't think of it. So therefore I'm able to do my job because you know it. So the love affair falls into what feels comfortable. We go out and we meet people and we meet couples. We fall in love with a couple story for us to tell. Our gear has to be that way too. So when you try something and I know right away, don't like the way this fits. This is going to be a beautiful picture. I'm not going to be invested in it. So it won't, it's not going to do what I need to do. So that's the love affair part. So you decided on Canon. Have you changed Canon, moving up the ladder with Canon? Have you hung up with this MD3s, or where have you sat with your Canon? And then where do you think you're going to move with your Canon?
That's a good question. So I started, my very first like digital wedding was a Rebel XTI, which was the bottom rung of a consumer level camera, and it had a L bracket with a Minolta flash hot synced into I looked like a 1950s TV reporter. It just looked goofy. So that was kind of like my first foray into Canon. So I started pursuing Canon. I jumped to the 5D line immediately, bought the 5D Classic first, and then the Mark II, Mark III, and then I really liked the 6D for its small form factor because I traveled so much at the time. So then I jumped to the prosumer line of the Canon 60s, and then from there my world was opened to the world of Leica. And a friend of mine told me Leica was like using a Rolls Royce, but you were a taxi driver. Like it was expensive for no reason, and you were just kind of burning the use out of it. But for me, it was more than that. It wasn't just like a status. It wasn't just a name tag on my camera. There was actually benefits to the glass that I decided to use. So I kind of switched and I went heavily into the Leica scene. I bought a lot of their rangefinder camera bodies, the M9, M240. I never bought the M10, but I loved it and used it some. Of course, the SL body too. So I'm a big, huge fan of Leica for a lot of things, but I know in the wedding world, it's usually either out of reach in terms of people's budgets or how they allocate for their ROI of what they're going to get. Because you can buy, for the price of some Leicas, you can buy an entire wedding kit and maybe even 2 wedding kits and have not only your own business, but even an associate photographer for the price of just getting into the Leica world. So big fan of Leica. They were really good to me too. They sponsor workshops and they want to keep a pulse on the wedding industry. So they're always happy to help and jump in. But the look that the glass in particular gave me, honestly, is one of my defining features. It's what I lean on. There's one particular lens. I brought it. It's by far my favorite. It's the Leica 50 millimeter Summilux, and it looks tiny, like this cute little lens. But this guy is magic. It creates something really special. So once I got into Leica, learned its benefits, then I was like, well, what if I could capture those benefits, particularly the glass, but maybe bring it back to what I'm maybe more familiar with, or maybe more in line with my budget at the camera lens or the Canon ecosystem. And once mirrorless came involved, and I know we could talk about that in a bit, it opened up a whole new realm of possibilities for older lenses with more character, and of course all my Leica gear too. So it's been nice kind of merging those two brands together.
So how do you know, again, you love Leica, we love that look, and I think again, that's that love affair. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one thing that makes me love photography is what I can do with that. And I do believe that there's products and services in all industries that's just you drive a certain car because the way it makes you feel. Doesn't make you all that much better, but it's a feel. So you have these cameras and you've invested this money. What is it like to take these workhorses, and how important is it to have a workhorse gear for what we do on wedding days? I mean, putting them down, the weather. How important is it that it might not be the most expensive camera, but man, it's a good solid piece of hardware?
I always joke. I tell people, don't buy used gear from me because I beat it up. I beat it to death. And I still sell a lot of used gear. So it's not, obviously it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I treat mine like a tool. I mean, for me, when I say tool, I think of a hammer. And a lot of times my cameras double as hammers. I'm bumping them into stuff or doing things with them. And for me to have a reliable system is first and foremost, because my wedding day has to be seamless. Every photo shoot has to be seamless. I can't say, oh, sorry, there's a glitch. Let me run to my truck and figure this out, or Googling on my phone. I don't know why the intervalometer's cut on. It just randomly cut on. It's taking a picture every 5 seconds. Smile. Because those things can happen, I can't have that happen professionally. Plus, I think it kills the mood, which kills the photos and all that fun stuff. So having something that really is a workhorse that you're not afraid to beat up. I remember I was hiking one time. I was teaching a workshop, and I was literally like, hey, we're all going to cross this river. Everyone be careful. And as I said that, my camera just fell out and fell into the river. And I literally was like, so nobody do this.
Right.
I just pulled it out of the river, blew it off, and I actually shot the rest of the entire photo shoot with that single camera. It was fine. So, finding cameras that can handle some of that abuse was really important to me. And that's kind of where I liked the Leica stuff, because particularly the SL with the L mount lenses, it's a tank. You can run over it with another tank and it might break that instead of the camera. Like, it's a monster. So that was beneficial when I was traveling more. But yeah, having something that you're not afraid to really run ragged and shoot. I shoot a lot. I'm an overshooter. People, my other photographer peers kind of laugh at me because I'll shoot 20,000 photos in a wedding. So stuff that like shutters will explode, you'll have to have a backup for that when the mirror stops flipping and all that stuff with DSLRs. And yeah, there's a lot to be aware of, and I'm not afraid of it. I'll beat it up to get the photo.
So now we have a very expensive paperweight if you're not careful. I mean, you can really have an expensive paperweight. So now we have your Canons. We're just going to stick with the Canons because that's what we're talking about. So now we have the Canons, and we have the gear, and we have all the things that go with it. How important now is it that it's manually overrode, that it has bells and whistles on it? How many bells and whistles do you have to have? And again, it's the love affair with the gear. It's okay if you want that, but if that's something that's needed.
Well, it's funny that you say that too, because a lot of people, they'll get really fancy cameras that are top of the line and able to do a lot. And then they throw it in manual mode because they think that's like the professional mode. And then they just leave all the bells and whistles behind, all the things that it can actually do. For instance, I'm a big fan of aperture priority mode, particularly on a wedding day. If I'm traveling in and out, inside and outside a lot, having a camera that's reliable and can handle that with a large dynamic range in case something misses to save a photo is really important to me. So things like auto ISO and aperture priority are frequently switched on my camera depending on the situation. So, a lot of people, I joke, they'll spend $3,000 on the newest camera body or more and then use only $500 worth of a camera. So, look into it. There's so many more things that your camera can do. It's a box with a hole in it. And people are treating $6,000 camera. Found myself in a situation where I don't have a tripod, but maybe my camera has an intervalometer inside of it. Well, I can still shoot, like a still tripod required photo. And I couldn't do that if I didn't know how the camera worked.
Exactly. And I think too, that we have all these bells and whistles, and those bells and whistles can break. The more bells and whistles, the more things that can break. So I think it's very important to invest in what you think you're going to use, but give yourself some room to grow. You have to be able to grow into it. So we have our two bodies, we have our two lenses. Now, what are we sticking in there? How important is it to, again, you invest all this money in these cameras, let's put a $2 CF card or SD card in there. How important is it that we don't use a $2, card media in there to make something work? So again, how important is it to have these accessories that we marry together to go with our investment that basically is the tools of our trade.
Yeah, if you buy a $5,000 camera that's known for its ability to take rapidly fast photos of high quality and high accuracy, but you put a really slow memory card in there, all of a sudden your burst rate goes from a boastful 11 frames per second down to 2 frames per second, which means the difference between a machine gun or a tick, tick, tick,
Right.
tick, and you could be missing key nuance moments in between those things. So if you don't have a faster memory card, which is usually the weak spot in a lot of new photographers' arsenal, because that's maybe not so much now, but a year ago, 2 years ago, because memory was kind of expensive.
Yeah.
You look at a memory card and you'd be like, oh, it's 64 gigs for like $100. I don't know if I can swing that. Nowadays they're giving memory away. Like you can buy really fast cards for $30. If you're doing SD or something like that. But yeah, so having the right card allows you to actually access all those bells and whistles. There's one bells and whistles that while you're talking, it reminded me of sometimes people could be scared of cameras and not look at certain brands because of some of those bells and whistles. And for me, I used to hate the articulating screens in cameras. I used to think, that's just a weak spot. Like I know how hard I am with my cameras. If I had a screen that came out on a hinge and then maybe the hinge can turn, so now the hinge is even smaller, like that's just going to break. I'm just going to rip the thing off and we'll just shoot viewfinder.
Right.
It turns out now I love it. I don't even look through my viewfinder anymore. I'm only looking at my live view screen. And now that I have an articulating screen, I don't have to lay on the ground quite as much as I used to.
Right.
I can just put the camera down, point the screen at me, and I can see what's going on. So those things, like those are bells and whistles that maybe you can look at and not appreciate, and then learn to appreciate as you give the tool a chance. You can use a wrench as a hammer all day long, but once you get a hammer in your hands, you're like, oh, this is way easier. Like I should have been doing this all along.
Exactly.
You could do that with a wrench, but it's not designed for it.
And I think too, it's like with all the accessories, we have these great cameras, we have these great lenses. You talked for a minute about going to Sigma. How important is it now to have the brand lens of the body with the brand lens of the lens? Is there ways that we can venture off? How important, in your opinion, is that?
Yeah. I think there's some power in sticking to a single brand, like Canon, the new cameras, like the EOS R, which is their new mirrorless. If you pair that with their newest RF lenses, some of the new lenses have their own like usable, turnable dials on the actual lens body. So say you can change the shutter speed and aperture with your fingers here, rather than clicking another button to change your ISO, you can do that on lens, which is honestly kind of a throwback to film days. There were a couple cameras that were toying with that. Even with iFocus, Canon used to have a film camera that would track your eyeball, and wherever you looked, it would focus the lens. It was pretty rad. So some of that's kind of all coming back and giving another shot. Well, none of the other brands are on that yet. Like Sigma doesn't have that. Fuji doesn't have that for a Canon mount. So yeah, as the other brands grow, I think they will. You'll find other cameras jumping on. So there's some benefit, but personally, I love mixing them. Like I shoot Sigma glass on my Canon. I shoot Leica glass on my Canon. I'd shoot Canon glass on my Leica all the time. So yeah, being all over the place, there's some value in trying new things. I used to have this, I would joke, it's like a hacked version. It was my Leica SL with an adapter. So it'd go from the SL mount or the L mount to an M mount, which is another Leica proprietary. Sorry, I'm getting really geeky here all of a sudden. To an M mount, to an EOS mount. And then the EOS mount was on my 45 tilt shift. So I could have this 45 manual focus tilt shift to give me a unique look to my Leica SL that nobody else in the world had tried yet. I could pretty confidently say that. So sometimes intentionally looking outside of your brand can give you a look that no one else has even imagined yet.
Right.
So I think it's important. There are some benefits, but there's also immense benefits to trying new things.
Well, and it goes back to the fact, if you invest in that camera body, beat the crap out of it, you're going to have it for, it's going to go, it's going to change, it's going to evolve. But if you get really good glass that continues to work for you, it will be the workhorse. So, you marry those lenses. And as we talk about going forward, a lot of these are going to fit on different brands. So as you evolve, you're still going to have the glass that you fell in love with to go on the new kid in town, or to go on the new girl you want to start dating, right? So you just have that in your arsenal. So now we talk about flashes and everything else. We know we're going to have them. Same thing. Do we stick to brand flashes? Is it okay to go off? And by all means, you feel free to use. I tagged most of your sponsors in your Instagram. I think I forgot a couple, but I tagged them because that's what we do. We want to share what we do. So what is some of the reasons you choose to use that equipment versus a Canon flash for $700 versus something else?
Yeah, goodness, that really is the crux of it for a lot of my decisions is what's my ROI? If the cost is this much, will it bring me this much? And sometimes the answer is just a simple yes. So I don't even blink like, this is what it costs, but I know it'll bring me this much business or bring me this much marketing, content, blah, blah, blah. And it's not even a second thought, but sometimes it really is, which one of these flashes are going to make my life easier and better? Which ones, even though this one might cost $200 and be 90% of what I need it to be, this one's 100% of what I need it to be, maybe even extra bells and whistles that I'll never even touch, but it's 4 times the price. Is that little 5% difference worth the exorbitant price tag? And a lot of times, sometimes it's a resounding yes, and sometimes it's a big goofy no. You don't need a $1,000 flash to do something that a $200 flash does reliably and consistently as well. So like my flash company that I personally use is called Geeky. They're an awesome company, but they play nice with other brands. So I started with Yongnuos. Well, I started with Canon, and those things, I went through those things like Tic Tacs. Their QC was not up to date, and it was quite expensive. So then I went with the knockoffs, the Yongnuos, and I loved those things because I could break them, I could drop them, an assistant could explode them, or I could hand them like, hey, you know what? Here's off-camera flash, just take this. And I'd give it to friends. Right. Because it wasn't that expensive, and I could replace them and buy a new one. But then I went from there to like Godox, which is definitely higher quality, and they've got their sister brand of Flashpoint through Adorama, and those are great. So I had some Godox triggers, but then I heard of Geeky, which did a lot of things the Godox brand was doing, but just in a slightly different form factor that I liked better. Some of the handles that you could use, and you could pass it to an assistant. It made more sense. Just how the modeling light was working, and those things. When that came out, I found out it worked well with the other brands like Godox. Well, and it was really easy to marry the two systems. So for me, now switching almost exclusively to Geeky, I still have Godox for a few things. So I think brand loyalty is kind of important in the flash realm, mostly because triggers are brand dependent. So if you don't find something like a Geeky that allows you to use a Godox flash, then you're out of luck. You got to buy a Geeky trigger. Or sorry, I meant to say trigger. So if you don't have a flash that can communicate, you got to stick with the brand that can communicate. That's the short.
And I think too, if talk about going geeky, it's if you look at wedding photographers on a Saturday. So engaged couples that are listening in, I don't know how many engaged couples might jump into this particular episode, but if you're here, I want to remind you that, you've just heard a lot of reasons of why there might be a couple extra dollars for what wedding photographers charge. But also, if you're at a wedding and you're there, I want you to look at the photographers. How many photographers actually have the name brand flashes? Now, Nikon makes a pretty dang good, flash system, but how many? I started my career as a sports photographer, so the joke always would be is, look at all the white cameras, look at all the white lenses on the field. Hence I got the big Canon 600s because that's what delivered. So, but we weren't using the Canon lighting. We were using something totally different, right? Yeah. So it goes, I think people use things that work. And if you see things that work, that's why it works, because it's reliable. And I'm going to tell you, other photographers that are listening, and I don't care what stage you're at, if you go dropping $600 and $700 flashes, the next wedding, you have to book a wedding and a half just to recoup. I don't care how much insurance you carry, but you have to think about that. And again, when you get the flash that works with the body, work with it for a while. I don't think that if you get something that's working, until you get that creative itch or you've done it for a while, you don't need to be changing. Get with a system that you grow into, and that will help you grow. So now we have all our flashes and we have all our bodies. Take us now into why we should maybe have mirrorless along with it. Can we shoot regular along with mirrorless? And will you ever go mirrorless all the way? I, for the record, have been mirrorless for the last couple of years. I'm a Fuji girl. And I love it.
Fuji's great.
I love it. I used to lug I remember the last one I did was at the Mac House down here in Savannah. For 4 weddings, I was lugging all my Canon gear, had all my Pelican case, it's in there.
Yeah.
The last 2, and I thought, that's it. I've never went to it. So therefore, it's now time for me to pivot. And going back to what we said earlier, I sold 2 or 3 bodies and bought 7 lenses and 2 more bodies in the Fuji, which is amazing. But my gear worked. I keep good care of my gear. I beat the crap out of it, but I knew there was still life for somebody else. So, our love affair is going to mirrorless. Good, bad. What's Bud Johnson think?
So I personally, I'm trying to think. I don't think I have a single DSLR anymore. I have SLR and I have film cameras.
Right.
So I still have that single lens reflex system, and I still use the mirrors and all that stuff. But no, the idea of mirrorless, of course, it just means it doesn't have that prismatic mirror to bounce the image into your viewfinder. Now it's just directly onto your sensor. So I've been shooting like that even when I had DSLRs because I like the live view. So even if I had an DSLR, I would frequently hit live view, flip the mirror up, and just shoot like that anyways. So I've kind of already been hobbling along mirrorless for a while, but now I've switched. The Leica SL is actually one of the first incredible mirrorless cameras that came out like 5-6 years ago. But now I shoot with the Canon EOS Rs, and they're both mirrorless cameras. And they're really easy to adapt. So I can actually still shoot all my old lenses that worked on DSLR that I purchased for my DSLR system, adapts perfectly to the mirrorless system. When you get rid of that mirror there between the image and you actually have a lot more space for other lenses. You can put adapters on and the camera can handle that. So it kind of opens up the world into other lenses.
And do you think we're going to stick with mirrorless for a while? What are that's a couple of the questions that came in for you. We'll throw a couple in here now. About Please. 2 or 3 of those questions were, how do you think we're going to grow fast in the mirrorless? Or do you think we're going to sit for a while? We got stagnant with just the old digital cameras for a while. Nothing changed. Then obviously the change went to digital. So do you think we have a year or 2? Is it too early to jump on the bandwagon? And if I'm jumping, where do you think I should begin?
Yeah, I think, I think mirrorless is definitely here to stay. And I think we're going to see more people, get them as the other ones kind of die out. So like if you bought a 5D Mark IV, a top of the line Canon SLR, digital SLR camera, that thing's going to last you for a couple of years, particularly if you don't beat it up like Bobbi and I. Maybe you baby it, it always gets back in its case, maybe it's some bubble wrap. If you really take care of it, goodness, that thing could last you 20 years. And if you find the photos are still amazing, then why do you need to upgrade? But for the professional who's burning through 150,000 actuations in a year, you've already retired your digital SLRs because you've had them for 12 months,
right? And
now it's time for something new. So I think the benefits of picking up a mirrorless camera are not only just for the brand scalability, so you can try new lenses and things, but it can be a little smaller, it can be a little easier on the pocketbook and your back. Sometimes the bells and whistles that they can put in a mirrorless system, it's almost like a little computer instead of a camera. It's like a computer that can take pictures, not a camera that's kind of like a computer. Like the bells and whistles are pretty incredible. So you can do a lot with them. So once you see what's out there, it's like, well, why not choose one of the new mirrorless options? I think DSLRs will still stick around for a little while. Maybe part of it's nostalgia. Some of it might be because it is tried and true. They work a little less battery requirements because it's just the physical movement. Even some of the old film cameras, you might come to mind too, like the one I showed you before, that Mamiya. It can shoot mechanically without any battery. At 400th of a second, it'll shoot no matter what, even if the battery's dead. So there's still some benefits to having the old, click clack of a mirror that can still allow you to take a photo. So I think there's always space for the reliable SLR experience, but I think most people are going to move to mirrorless, not even for mirrorless sake. It's just, no one's like, let me find a mirrorless option.
Right.
Give me all those. They're just like, what's the newest camera? That's the one I want.
Right.
So it just happens to be mirrorless.
Well, look how fast film came back, 3 or 4 years ago. Heck, there's the groups out there like looks like film. Is this film? Yet there's people shooting on film, and I challenge a lot of the newer photographers. If you think it's expensive now, imagine if some of you guys that were shooting 20,000 images. I can't even imagine what you think your lab bill because,
Yeah.
and with respect to gear and cameras, I'm that old school person. When I pick up my camera, it's been privileged to tell some stories.
Yeah.
I remember that ding, or I remember that. It's with me. And I know that it is, I don't have any duct tape around it. Now I can tell you my sports days, I had some duct tape on some things, right? We had duct tape around the lenses so that I wasn't that photographer that had the hood fall off on the ice rink and the hockey player come by and go, what the hell, timeout? Yeah. But I mean, it's the stories, our tools tell the stories that we got to capture. And so I like when it sees that. So one of the other questions that came in, it says, I want to get all geeky with Bud. Can Bud take a few minutes and explain what this crop factor means? I'm on the verge of wanting to go mirrorless, but what's this crop factor mean?
Yeah, man, I wish I was sitting in front of my chalkboard. This would be way easier.
Yes, exactly.
To write it out. Basically, the way to look at it is here. We can do this though. I'll take one of these pictures down. This is with my lovely wife and my daughter.
Yep.
So this is, imagine that's happening in front of you. Imagine this is happening in front of you, and you pull the camera up and click, you take the photo, and this shows up on your sensor. This is a photo, but if I then crop it in, if I, decide to cut this image here, here, and here, and here, basically I've got a crop factor image of what I just took. So if my sensor was larger, I could get this image. But because I have a crop sensor, now I'm only seeing this image if I was in the exact same place with the exact same lens. That's all I would get. So it's essentially, you're just kind of cutting off the edges of a larger sensor. That's all the crop factor is. So it kind of confuses people because it looks like if you have a crop sensor camera and you're shooting at like 18 millimeters, which on a full frame sounds crazy. That's really wide image. But on a crop factor, again, if this is the wide image, a crop factor is only going to see this much of it. So it tricks you, and it thinks you've got a 35 millimeter because a crop factor is usually 1.6 is the ratio. So something wide all of a sudden becomes something close. There are some cameras that even will have internal crop on purpose, like the Canon EOS Rs. You can say, hey, I have a 35 millimeter on my camera, but I want it to look like it's a 50 millimeter. And you can say, okay, switch it to crop factor of 1.6. Now, in my opinion, it's goofy because all you're doing is losing megapixels at that point. It really is just slicing off the edges of your sensor, but it gives you that vibe. Some people like the look of that. Some people think it has less like warp. It has less of a vignette to it sometimes because you are trimming off the edges. So crop factor really just means you have a smaller sensor to try to capture whatever's in front of you. Your full frame has more canvas size to see more of the image. That's really, really it.
And the other questions came up sort of along that line is, do crop lenses fit on crop bodies? And again, in growing and falling in love with your gear and having a whole bunch of it, if I change to a mirrorless right now, are all my lenses going to come along? Do I have to buy something else? How can I salvage the love affair I have with that lens that may not always turn out on the mirrorless side? How do I make that work? Or what's that transition look like?
Yeah, there are ways to make a transition where you can still shoot with the mirrorless options and still use all the lenses that you've loved before. So even when you buy any camera, for me, that's part of my research is this going to make all of my other purchases, all my other glass, memory cards, batteries defunct? For me, like I loved sticking with the Canon ecosystem in terms of body because I have a pile of batteries that I know are reliable. And if I had to buy a whole new system, well, that's hundreds of dollars that are just sitting there. I can either sell or throw away or whatever, but now I can use them all. So batteries, I switched to SD cards years ago. So I know that my current bodies use SD cards. So I don't have to buy all new cards. My current bodies also use all of the glass, even the old glass from before. And some of the options you have are adapters. Like this lens I brought out earlier, this Leica 50 Summilux. This has actually got an adapter on it right now. This black part right here is an adapter, and it's a Leica M mount. That's this glass to an EOS R body. So because of this little $8 piece of black steel, I can get this, much older lens on my brand new camera body for $8. And I have all of the the benefits of this glass on my new body. So
and you would
that
need
was
to buy one of those for each lens to go with your. So if you have some old Minolta lenses, or you stumble on these, people are stumbling on some of these old Minolta and Pentax lenses and in shops that are in really good shape. How do we get them to work on our new mirrorless cameras?
Fuji. I love this little tiny Fujicon. It's the Fuji Photo Film Co. Fujion 51.8. Like it's old. I think this probably is older than I am. But paired it with this adapter, this Canon adapter, it shoots brand new on my Canon lenses. So I guess I do love your love affair for Fuji. I have a little piece of it as well. But this is just an old manual 50 millimeter that's ancient, but I remember using this exact same lens on my mom's DSLR when I was like 10. Like I remember this feeling, I remember the look, and I was able to get that nostalgia, the glass that could change the image on my brand new sensors of the Canon. So this again was only like a $70 adapter. This is kind of more pricey, but it goes directly from this old, probably 50 plus year lens onto a brand new camera body. Perfect. So no, you can definitely bring stuff along for sure.
But I think that's fun too. If you hunt and you find something, again, you buy $25 lens at the flea market, it's a paperweight, but my gosh, if you can get it to do something, how cool and fun is that? So
exactly.
We have a photographer from Arizona who is asking, his name happens to be Mark in Arizona. Wanted to know digital cameras, and especially Fuji cameras, seem to be coming with a lot of presets loaded. Mm-hmm. How does Bud feel about the presets and the camera effects in a camera versus, that's just different. But I will preface it by saying, remember in the old film days, guys, we bought Astra, or we bought, Tri-X. So you're trying to bring that full circle again, but I don't think it has the same effect. But, again, they're asking Bud. So what do you think? And is that a factor for buying a camera if it has that bell and whistle?
I think the video guys have really got us beat here because they've been shooting on, they'd have a camera body and they would run their HDMI out to another monitor that they could usually watch at the same time.
Right.
And that monitor is usually loaded with a particular preset, whatever they edit with. And it doesn't mean it's finished. There's still some polishing to do, but now they can actually see the image with the applied preset to their video live. And that's incredible. And all these cameras have live view. Like I said, I shoot 99% live view anyways. Why not have at least my look and feel preloaded onto the camera? So I do that to an extent. I don't have a exact mirror image of my preset on the camera, but if I'm taking pictures, and I like, oh, Bobby, you just got to look at this photo, and I show it to you. Well, if it looks nothing like my portfolio, like, okay, well, that's pretty, I guess. Like I see the potential. I'm like, oh, I'm going to blur this out. I'll dodge here, and we'll add some vibrancy and some contrast, it'll be incredible. My clients don't have any idea what that means. No. But if I can show them back at the camera, then there's extreme value in having a preset loaded on. But if you're not a person who shows back at the camera, then no. If you're not a person who thinks that's, an added benefit, then it's not required by any means. Some people take it as like maybe a lazy way out sometimes. Like, hey, here's the preset. I take the picture. It's in JPEG and I don't even have to edit it. Here it is. It's done. And that's really rad. If you got a workflow like that, awesome. I'm not there. I have a little bit more of a delicate touch to my photos. So for me, I shoot in a RAW format anyways. And I get no matter what you shot it in, whatever preset you applied in camera, in RAW, you're going to have much more information to deal with. So it's kind of like, it's a lot more opportunity for editing. So I think it's really cool. I love the fact that you can put presets on cameras. I think in particular, the Fujis and the Sonys, you can edit and load some of your own personal ones. I think that's really rad.
You can create your own. You can create your own look. But again, Fuji really tends it to that. It goes back to my days of I just love having all my f-stops and all my shutter speed. Click, click, click. My fingers are doing the work. I don't have to, look down. But then that brings we have another question from a video / photographer. I'm a husband and wife team. What's Bud's view on the same camera bodies, one for video, one for film, and are the video cameras and the film cameras the same? Is there a reason why I should do something different? I think he basically, instead of film, I think he just means dual process. Yeah.
Man, I think nowadays the camera bodies, it's funny even hearing that question as someone who has been in it for a while, because people don't realize how good they've got it. Like, before it really was like, here is your body for photos, here's your bodies for film. And they will never see each other. Like very different economies in terms of cost and ecosystems in terms of brand. And they've barely bumped into each other. If they did occasionally, like video would borrow a lens from still and stuff like that. But nowadays, goodness, yeah, you can have an incredible system on a single camera and do both. There's a wedding photographer that I reach or look up to, and I subscribe to his Patreon. His name's Taylor Jackson. He has this thing where he actually will photo and video at the same time. So he'll take picture with a click of a button. He's shooting video, and it's high quality. Now, it's not the replacement of a dedicated cinematographer. He makes a point to say that, and so do I. But you certainly can get incredible cinematic footage out of what most people would assume is just a still camera. For instance, my Canon EOS Rs, my mirrorless, that's what I shoot all my wedding work now on and all my YouTube videos. So I don't need a dedicated or different camera. It's all one package, really easy.
And bringing us into COVID-19, which you're in,
what
is Bud's opinion on safety features? Does he feel we're going to have to be having gloves on our camera? Are we going to have to be wrapping our cameras up? Are we worried about people touching our lenses? Again, we're not lawyers. We're not scientists. We have a crystal ball. This is Bud's opinion and my opinion on how we treat COVID. So listeners, please, keep that in mind with your letters when you send it to me.
Well, I'll tell you, every photographer should have either like a microfiber cloth within arm's reach, or a stack of those like moist wipes. You can wipe something down. I'm notorious. I very rarely have lens caps. Like even the ones that I've shown you a couple times, they don't even mismatch. They're just going to sit on them and bounce around. So for me, having that stuff handy is nice in case I do drop something in the dirt and need to clean it. Well, if you have that, it's super easy to also put in like a little thing of antibacterial or some like, single-use wipe, something like that. If you're the type of person who touches their face a lot, I think I've touched my face like 50 times since talking to you. If you're a person who is a close talker, if you're a person who says like, hey, can you hold this for me? Or can you get something for me? You just need to be aware that all those are touch points where, not only is your safety an issue, but the safety of everyone else you're going to meet. And as a guy with a family of 6, I've got ranges from 8 down to 1. I got kids I got to think of.
Right.
Even though I think I can take a virus on the chin, and I know that's going to seem really insensitive. I promise it's not. I'm kidding. But my kids, I don't want to put them in the position to have to deal with those symptoms and the consequences of that. So being smart is important. I don't let it paralyze me. I still work hard. I've had a couple of photo shoots in the midst of this, and we all showed up to the shoot in masks, and by the end of it, we're like, we all are fine, right? And slowly the masks disappear, and everyone's kind of easy, and we're not dumb. We're not like kissing at the end of the photo shoot or sneezing in each other's faces, but we're also trying to be real and smart about it as well.
Exactly.
I always have a mask within arm's reach these days, but I can't tell you when. I want to wear a mask for other reasons: Big Brother, surveillance, all that like crazy libertarian stuff. I've got all those things in the back of my head already. So any opportunity to say, yeah, let's go ahead and be smart about it, I will be. But I guess like most Americans, I value my comfort, and sometimes a mask is less comfortable. I also don't hear very well out of my left ear. I don't hear very well. So I need to see people's lips a lot of times to stay in conversations. And once you do this, you might as well not talk to me anymore. It's really hard. So that's one of those things that not a lot of people are talking about is people with bad hearing. Goodness, it's a whole other level of, I was once very personable and easy to talk to. And now I don't know what you're saying. I hope it's a smile. I can't tell.
Well, as they said, whoever invents the mask with the Bluetooth, they'll never have to work again. Whoever invents with a built-in mic or a clear ears will never, and we know all those COVID things. We're going to have so many genius things coming up that are going to be a cause of this. One of the other questions that came up, and I think it's adorable. He just wrote Rick on when he sent a DM to me. It's just Rick, and it just says, "Can I be a true geek and a true professional if I use UV filters on all my lenses?"
Yeah, I think so. I personally don't. There was a time I remember when I was like stacking them. I'd have UV, and then I'd have like a circular polarizer, and then I'd have like just an extra one for protection. And I was like, why are all my photos so hazy and out of focus?
Right.
And it was just stacking these silly variable ND filters and stuff like that. There's a time when I shoot video, I'll use a variable ND filter. Usually though, I don't have anything on my lens. Not that I suggest that.
Right.
Everyone knows where they are on the spectrum of clumsiness. Me for one, I don't call it clumsy. I'm just rough with my stuff. If I was clumsy, maybe I would take different precautions. But yeah, I don't know. Is UV a problem in his photos?
Exactly.
As he said,
it's like, do you need to have that extra polarizing? You don't live somewhere where we do. We have blue skies every day. Yeah, no.
Yeah. If you find it, well, that's actually, you mentioned blue. That's a good point too. Like if your photos, if you subscribe more to like the light and airy side, then it makes sense to have a blown out sky sometimes, because that's not part of it. If you consider yourself more of like a colorful, vibrant, or maybe authentic's not the right word, but accurate, trying to say like the sky is clearly blue to us. Can it be clearly blue in the photo? Maybe that does require a circular polarizer. So you can be smart about it. I, for one, have never had a problem like, a UV filter would have really helped here. So
Bummer.
Because of that, I've never used it. Yeah.
And it goes back, everybody, listeners, it always goes back to our couples don't have any idea. I know we have Google and Siri and everything, and they all want to look things up, and it's apples to oranges. But I always, if anybody comes to me and says, "Oh, this photographer is using 4 of this kind of lenses," and what are you using? I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to tell you to go use that photographer. I'm not going to even deal with you."
Yeah.
Well, then one of the other questions that comes up is, what is Bud's favorite specialty lens? And if I need a specialty lens, what is one I should get?
That's a good question. Like several lenses kind of came to mind. My favorite specialty, and it is by far probably the most like specific special use, is a 45 millimeter tilt shift by Canon. Canon makes a bunch of tilt shifts of varying focal lengths, but my favorite is the 45. Second close favorite is the 90. But the 45 tilt shift just gives a unique look that's hard to manage, hard to master, very hard to master. Particularly for portraits. If you're taking pictures of stuff, macro photography, architecture, tilt shift is super easy. Well, not easy, but adequate for the job. Taking portraits of people, it gets really funky really fast, and it's a very specific lens. And if it's overused, your whole gallery will look silly. Like, why is everything out of focus up here and out of focus down here? And you've got this one line of focus on more than a few photos, it starts to look silly. So it's a very specialized particular lens that.
And when would you use that lens though? When would you, wedding photography wise, when would you have a 45 millimeter tilt shift that you need to go grab? When would you have to go, I need that in my bag, I'm going to use it now?
I use it for 2 main things. One is if I'm ever at an advantage in terms of height. So like St. John's Cathedral, I love going in the balcony up there and getting a tilt shift image from there because it just looks so unique, something so vast. And when you apply the tilt shift to the scene, it just gives it such a unique look. So actually, we're going to get really geeky here. I've taken the 45 tilt shift and I've framed an image, focused, locked the focus, and then I've taken multiple images around the entire scene and then stitched them together in post-production. So now I've got this mega mondo photo of this tilt shift exaggerated effect that makes the people stand out. They look like they're like stop animation from like Mr. Rogers days, like little tiny people in this big overarching out of focus scene. And it just, that to me is super cool. Very specific. You'd only use it for that one situation. Another one is like Tybee Island Wedding Chapel. I love that balcony up there, shooting down and doing a tilt shift. It just makes everything look almost miniaturized, but still authentic. It just gives it a unique look. During couples portraits, occasionally if I need to blur like power lines out, Victory North kind of comes to mind. If you're shooting in the back courtyard and there's a lot of power lines, you can use a tilt shift and just shift it back a little bit, and all of a sudden all those power lines going to disappear. So it comes and goes. Usually if I've got more time too. It's not my first lens. Like, all right, we're starting couples portraits, pull out 45. That's not my first go-to. It's usually, okay, we did our timeline. We scheduled this much time for family or for couples portraits. And look, we've got an extra 5 minutes. Let me go grab the 45. I bet we can do something cool. So that's a very specific, very niche lens. But when it hits, it hits.
Don't you think that a lot of photographers, when you get going, want to come up with a signature shot? And that's one of the things that you can come up with and do. And again, you heard Bud say it, you need to get your job done. But if you can squeeze these in and get this in, these are things that set you apart. And I think they also challenge us creativity. So it follows up on your favorite special lenses. What's Bud's favorite portrait lens for weddings?
Favorite portrait lens, I would probably say, is the Leica Summilux 51.4. And you can, that it might come as a sticker shock if you just randomly Google that. You can find them used on eBay, KEH, and different places to bring some of the price down. But that lens in particular, it's a manual focused lens. It's an M mount lens, so it was originally built for the Leica rangefinder system. So there's nothing automatic about it. If I put this on my camera and I take a photo, I'm zooming. The aperture ring is actually on the lens as well. If you can hear that click,
Yeah.
Everything's on this particular lens. So, after a while, it becomes second nature. At first, though, it slows you down. Like, we're going to be very intentional. We're going to be very deliberate. The photo is going to be artistic. Like, you're actually spending time thinking about it rather than just click, click, click. The light's good. Click, click, move over here. Click, click, click. All these are good. Cool. I'll find 3 out of that. And you just kind of move on. This one's very like, hey, the lighting works for this lens at this time, and it's going to sing. It's going to sing a pretty song for us. So that one's my favorite. I really use that one quite a bit, actually.
And I think it's that lens aperture too. I think that aperture just, it doesn't always have to be a portrait lens. It depends on what portrait you're trying to convey, what story you're trying to convey in that portrait.
I shoot portraits a lot at 35, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
The Sigma 35 art tells a lot of stories as well. And there's very little, there's nothing that can't be fixed in post in terms of like how it looks warped wise. If you're too close to somebody with a wide angle lens, they can look kind of distorted. That's really easy to fix in post-production nowadays, particularly if you're shooting with a popular lens like that. Lightroom you can switch it and say, hey, I shot this on the Sigma 35. And it says, oh, well, this is what you need to do. Bloop, and it just fixes the vignette, it fixes the warp.
Right.
And so when I import my photos, I make sure that's checked, and it knows to compensate to an extent with 35.
And you want to use the right tool. I mean, you want to be creative, but you want your job first is to tell the story and document the moments and the time and deliver something that is meaningful to that couple. I mean, we can all take a portrait in the middle of the street, but these guys are dressed up really nice, so we need to make it extra special. Know the tool. We're moving on to what are Bud's favorite continuing education. Where do I go to get all the geek knowledge? Some of the places that he goes to. Adding on to that, are there particular geeky technical gear workshops? Again, we're in COVID-19. I don't know if anything's happening. We can look that up, but where do you sit, Bud? Of course, your YouTube and Instagram. And, before we wrap up, we'll talk about your teaching and mentoring, but where can people go? Where can they go and learn more about how to fall in love with their camera, get some good information, not just Google information, and then some workshops that you might recommend? And obviously, if you're speaking somewhere coming up.
Yeah, I have some opinions about that. So for me, experience in a lot of ways is kind of like the harsh teacher. You experience something and like, an oven, a stovetop is hot, but if you put your hand on it, the experience says, hey, this is hot, and you'll always remember that. That's a hard teacher. Right. Example is the easy teacher. You see your big brother put his hand on the stovetop and he screams because it's hot. You didn't have to do it, for the rest of your life. So for me with gear, if you can get some gear and just try it, I think that's going to educate you in a sense where you will always know how to work it. So try things, rent things, buy things, and just try it yourself. Just experiment. That all being said, there's a website called SLR Lounge that a guy knows. His name's Pyders. He runs it with a team of incredible people. I cannot suggest enough to look at SLR Lounge from top to bottom in terms of gear. You can get as geeky as you want to get. You can get as philosophical as you want to get. Their business from top to bottom. If you want to become a professional wedding photographer, you need to, even if it's just the free resources, you need to know about SLR Lounge, and their premium benefits are very inexpensive and last a very long time. So that would, if you're willing to drop a couple of dollars, I'd probably like maybe $300, probably less than $300, would get you a premium membership to the entire website. And I can't tell you how beneficial that will be to your art, to your creativity, to your business, and everything in between. But there's so many free resources out there on YouTube.
Right.
A good self-disciplined person with a timer, maybe a wife or a friend or someone who's be like, hey, don't waste all your time doing this. Check these things out. If you can dedicate yourself to looking for good resources, there are a lot of free resources out there. Workshops, conventions are awesome. I'm a huge fan of WPPI out in Las Vegas. Not only have I made some of my closest friends in the industry, but I've learned a lot from going there. Workshops are awesome. I host a couple from here, a couple every year, sometimes in the States, sometimes abroad. And those can cover a wide range of topics, from everything just, how do you run a business? How do you talk to people? To, hey, what f-stop should I keep this on at all times because of this light to get this flare, this particular, degree of sunset. So it can get really geeky really fast. Those person-to-person, face-to-face workshops are hard to beat. There's a lot of value. That means they're also usually more expensive, right. but you learn a lot of those things if you want to.
It's the tech and touch. I mean, it's 80% of conventions are the same as 80% of virtual conventions. The 20% is what we have to figure out. And that 20% is usually people coming and talking to you and I over dinner, and you and I go, oh my God, look what I just learned. And you paid me to be here, because I learned so much when when people go, hey, can we take you to dinner? Or I learned so much more from people. I'm like, this is a bonus here, right? Yeah. Because it's that tech touch. It's that communication that we have to deal with. And so especially moving forward with COVID, I think we're going to see more and more. I mean, I know I'm doing more and more teaching this way and mentoring this way. And it's just the way that it grows. But I'll add on to, you can spend a lot of time following a lot of people with big numbers. And there's been a lot of stuff going on in the last few weeks on Facebook, and the last couple of days especially. Just because somebody has 5 bazillion followers doesn't mean they're working in the industry. I will go to my grave saying, I want to follow people that are doing the work. I want to show me that you're doing the work and that you put the time in and blood, sweat, and tears. And I don't want to just go see you because you're selling something. I want the experience. I want to know that, Bobbi, I dropped that lens, or I did this, or these marks all came from hockey pucks that came across my forehead when I tell that story, and I want to talk the battles of why this is hard for women to get into. When I started, it was all men. And in some of my talking, I talk about, but the gentlemen that were there, I proved myself with that 6'4", 5". They're like, there's no way you'll be able to carry that up and down the big cathedrals. I ran circles around them, and I did it. And I got to see at the table. And the whole thing is pull your damn chair up to the table and learn. Don't be intimidated. You don't take criticism from people that you wouldn't take advice from. So go and meet and find and follow people like Bud. And that is going to dumb it down. I mean, he brings it down to a level that makes sense. So one of the last questions, we got about 6 questions on this topic. That'll be how we wrap up, because I want to respect your time. It's technical, business, one before the other, marry them together. How do I advance to get more gear and fall in love if I don't have my business in order?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was recently talking to a friend about that, and particularly in the light of the coronavirus and COVID-19, because so many small business owners have, for the first time in a long time, opportunity for this economic loan, the EIDL loan. Right. So a lot of my friends are like, hey, I randomly got approved for a good chunk of change. Should I even think about loans and going into debt for my business and things like that? And for the longest time, the clear answer was, no, that's ridiculous. Like, just be scrappy, take some small assignments, save up your money, and figure it out. And that's been my answer for a very long time. This does change things. This is a pretty incredible opportunity for small business owners to get and secure a really decent sized loan for a very small rate. And you really could kick off a business. Now, the loan's not for that, to start a business. Right. It's for normal operating costs. But man, it can give you a little bit of breathing room to take some chances and to try things that you were maybe already planning to do, but because you lacked the capital immediately, maybe you couldn't do it. So I know it's kind of a broad stroke answer to the question, but my original question outside of COVID and Corona and stuff like that is just be scrappy, take small assignments with the bite-sized chunks of gear you have now, and keep adding. And really, that's kind of what I did. That way you don't go into a bunch of debt. You don't have credit cards that you have to pay off, loans to parents or friends. If you're willing and you're responsible enough to do those things, great, do them correctly. If you are like me, I tend to be this aloof creative type, so to speak. It doesn't mean I'm very good with money. So my wife thankfully is. Right. So for me, it wouldn't have been smart to let me go get like a HELOC on my house and get, $30,000 and start a business. Like, no, I would chew through the 30 grand, and then I just have monthly payments for the rest of my life to pay the silly loan off. So it's not for everybody. But I would say you can accomplish a lot with a single body and a single lens, like family portraits. You could very easily with one body and one lens, because if you mess up at a family portrait, it's a huge bummer and a giant ego kick, but you can recover from that. A wedding is a different story. Don't mess up somebody's life. Don't mess up somebody's, memories. Don't be silly about that.
If you do that, you will have nothing but you will be selling gear because you will never be working again.
Yeah. So like family portraits, even engagement sessions, like you could become the engagement gal. Like, hey, I just do engagements and only engagements. Like, hey, you can go to other photographers and say, are you booked up? Like, I would love to shoot some of your engagements. Do you have any things that you can send my way? And just become the engagement person and shoot that. And before you even book a wedding, and even then after a while, a couple $100 times 10 adds up real fast. And now you can buy some of those dream bodies or dream pieces of glass just by kind of keeping this hobby. And really, you could do that in a month's time. Like if you work hard for a month, you could fund yourself almost an entire wedding kit just by doing stuff on the side. And I'm super happy to talk in more detail with any of your listeners, anybody. They can always hit me up and ask some questions. That's really the scrappy type of hard work you have to do for a multitude of other reasons, like not just gear, one that can help you acquire gear, but it also, hones your talent. You meet vendors, you've got word of mouth, you've got experience, you've got content for social media. Like it's not just, can I make a couple extra $100 to buy a lens, but now can I really actually start this business authentically? So I think they go on at the same time. Everybody's a little different, and you could secure a loan and jump into gear up to your eyeballs and make it all back and pay it off quick. That's great too. I don't think that's for everybody. Exactly.
Especially now in these uncertain times.
Yeah.
So I'm always about numbers and everything. So I went 5. I went 5 things that you can tell our listeners that they can do and that are okay to have a love affair with their gear. 5 things they can do to achieve gear that will help them continue to grow and build, whether it's going get something, maintaining something, whatever it is. 5 things that these guys can work on as homework and become attainable in doing.
Let's see. So 5 things. One is I would take a healthy inventory of what you currently have. I think people will be surprised at what they can accomplish with what they already own. Even a kit lens can still surprise you. If they want a $15 macro filter from Amazon on a kit lens, and boom, you got yourself what could have been $1,000+ lens that you had to buy just for macro, like ring photos and stuff, that now you've got, it was just a piece of junk lens that you're going to throw away anyways. And now it's salvageable. So take a good inventory of what you've currently got, sell all the junk. If you sell all the junk, all of a sudden you've got some pocket change to make your first rental. So sell all the stuff that you're not using. You might have in the past, you've got a closet, you take all your clothes and you put them all on hangers and make sure they're facing one way. At the end of the year, if any of, all the hangers, they switch them as they use them. Like, okay, I didn't use any of those clothes. They all got to get out of here.
Right.
Same thing with your gear. If you've got an inch layer of dust on a lens, kick it to the curb. You don't use it, sell it. Even if it's for $20, if it's a cheap thing, now you've got some pocket change to buy a better memory card, an adapter. Now you can all of a sudden offload 2 cards instead of 1 after a wedding. There's so many little things you can get. So taking inventory, selling your junk. Another one would be like asking the people you look up to some of their favorite purchases. We're all going to resonate with different photography skills and different parts of the industry that are important to you. Maybe someone's like, dude, I want to take pictures of stuff, like all the beautiful cutesy wedding things and just all the sparkles and all the macro. Like, how do I accomplish that? Well, you wouldn't go to me and if I told you buy a Leica 50, the minimum focus distance on this is over 3 feet. So you can't shoot any macro with this ever. You can't even try. So you got to find the people you like. So someone like that might say, hey, get the 100 macro, 2.8 from either Nikon or Canon, and you'll love it. Okay, well, you ask the right person to get the right stuff and go to those people. And you're only going to do that if you follow their social media, if you follow the Facebook website and stuff like that. So cold calling photographers sometimes goes really well and sometimes it doesn't, but you'll never know until you try. So reaching out.
On that, I'll add right here is ask somebody not how you do what you do, but why you do what you do. Phrase the question. If you come to me and say, hey, Bobbi, I love that look. Is that a lens? And is that why you use that? Why is that? Because you're not going to see all that pretty detail from me. I'm that people person. Remember, I'm that hockey photographer that's going to get that blood smacking against the wall.
Yeah.
Hence why I get hired by grooms, because they're like, shit, she can stop a puck in midair. She will stop us walking down the damn aisle, right? So again, if you come and say, hey, bud, why is it your pictures look like that? What is it about that lens? I don't need to know how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But so listeners and photographers that are listening in, videographers too, go that way. Not tell me how you do it or show me, but what's the why behind why you chose that piece of gear. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I really wanted to get that point across, because I think that's what scares a lot of people off. But you have to ask, but people are so afraid to ask, but it's how you ask the question.
I can't tell how many times I'll get a message to say, hey, I'd love to take you out to coffee and ask you how you did this.
Right.
And like, they already shot themselves on the foot because I don't drink coffee. But one person said, hey, I want to buy you a 12-pack of Diet Dew and ask you a question. I'm like, yeah, sure. I got time for that.
Exactly.
So knowing your audience, knowing what time they have and can do. Because I try to be as open book for anybody, but you're right. Sometimes it is limited in terms of time and what we can accomplish. Those three big ones are really big. Another one would be to rent gear. I'm not a huge rental guy, because to me it kind of felt like taking a handful of cash and just throwing it to someone else. But truthfully, I have rented a few things. I'm like, I wonder if, would I prefer the 45 over the 90 tilt shift? Well, let me rent the 90. It's much more expensive lens. I'm not going to buy a $4,000 lens just willy-nilly, but I could rent it for $80 on a weekend.
Right.
Give it a shot and okay, now I can definitively say I don't like it. Well, that saved me thousands of dollars and the headache of buying it and keeping the box somewhere and selling it and all the rest. So renting stuff is a really good opportunity. And also, man, just trying different brands. I think as things do move towards mirrorless, and a lot of the brands are almost getting penalized if they don't play nice with other people. I don't mean literally, there's no consortium of photographers wagging the finger at somebody, but if your camera lens plays nice with so many other brands, just by sheer numbers, they're going to try more. So maybe it's worth trying a different brand of lens. Maybe it's trying to get into Sigma. Tamron is one to really watch right now. They've got some incredible lenses that have come out in the last 6 to 12 months that fit all of the major brands. Sony, Sigma has its own camera body now. So, be willing to try those few things. For me, what made me stick out in Savannah, in my opinion, is partly the gear. No one else that I know of in our zip code shoots with the Leica glass. I don't know anybody who does, film or not. So giving that unique look and unique flair, that slightly subtle, different bokeh signature, all adds up. So being willing to try something new, and maybe something that before was out of your price range, but maybe you've been able to squirrel away some money, or maybe it was just piddly. I'm not going to buy a $25 thrift store lens, like you said before, but you might find all of a sudden that's your hitter, that's your signature, that's your magic lens, and it was $30 at Goodwill. So being willing to try something else, of all spectrums, cheap or expensive, I think will allow you to have a custom gear journey just for you.
And I think that's it. Find a bag. So when somebody says to you, what's in your bag? These are the tools I use. It does you no good to have $1,000 in your bag if you don't even take them out and try them. And I say, if you've got that 45 tilt shift lens and you make one look every weekend, that's what sets you apart. And, Bud and I are both transplants to this market. And so our talent alone wouldn't always get us where we need to do, but we both do something different. And that's the key. It's okay to do that. Find your gear, fall in love with your gear, and then you can work on your business. And I hate to say I don't want to do a gear talk, but I wanted to do a gear talk because we talk about it like it's an extension of if you have this or that. It is find what you want and your business will grow. Because if you know these tools and you use these tools and they make you do your job better, you will have a wonderful career. You will have this is a wonderful career to be into. COVID or no COVID, there's Fabbo on the other side of this. And it's the opportunities are here. And we have to figure out the opportunity that we might have to pivot or we might have to do. And we all have the opportunities. So you might sell the lenses you're not needing right now, or the gear. So, listeners, hopefully today, and I know you did, you heard Bud, drop some numbers, you drop some lenses. You're all going to be Googling and checking it out. But what you heard him say was, find what you love, fall in love with it, and then use it to better enhance your career. So remind everybody, Bud, all the places they can find you. Again, Tina put in show notes, but from your voice, where can they find you, and anything that you want to share with them or something special you got coming up, do that now for us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The easiest place is just budjohnson.com. It's my website. It's got all of our information there. Instagram is probably where I'm most active. I took a little bit of a hiatus during the Corona stuff just because we were spending so much time with family. So we're jumping back into that head first, and kind of ran kind of a fun experiment, honestly, because I was so addicted to Instagram and it brought us so much business. I kind of wanted to know what happens if I pumped the brakes intentionally and didn't do it like a missing in action type of way, but very intentionally stepping away. And we've still noticed a lot of respect and a lot of flexibility there. So all that to be said, Instagram is a great place. It's just at Bud Johnson Photo. But yeah, on YouTube, you can always type in just Bud Johnson and some stuff will show up there. Speaking arrangements, everything is kind of in the air with Corona. Right. So all of the normal workshops, I know you had Wendy on recently for our Instagram workshop. That's paused. We don't have a date yet for that just because we're waiting on things. All the big conferences that I normally get to speak at are kind of scratching their heads, wondering what will happen. So as we know more, we'll be sharing that on social. But if anybody ever wants to talk, we do a lot of these like Zoom calls and FaceTime calls with people. So yeah, anybody can always reach out to us. Email is great. Just bud@budjohnson.com.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever's easiest for everybody. We're happy to chat and love to meet new people.
And like I said, everybody, follow him for the wealth of information that he shares. He'll warm your heart with his creativity. He's a wonderful storyteller, but don't be Bud. Be yourself with the twist of Bud. Use what he taught you today. Go and try some of those lenses. Again, you heard about rental, you heard about finances, but fall in love with your gear. And we're both here to tell you that it's okay to fall in love with your gear. And don't let anybody tell you not. If you need 75 lenses, you use 75 lenses. If you need 3, by all means, you do 3. Thank you, Bud, for spending your hour and a half with us. I totally appreciate it. Everybody follow Bud. And remember, thanks for pushing that listen button. We appreciate it. Lead with your heart. Go out. And remember, no matter where you are, I am cheering you on. Everybody go out. Keep being Fabbo. Thanks, Bud.
You're the best. Thank you.
For more information about today's episode, check the show notes at befabbopodcast.com. Hey, while you're there, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for Monday Motivations, delivered hot to your inbox. And there'll be more. Can we say more? Till next time, be Fabbo.